So let's start right away with the thesis here. I think Theon Greyjoy in Game of Thrones is almost a mirror character with Smeagol from Lord of the Rings. And I'm saying that because I just had one of those moments where two things that I'm currently enjoying, which is watching Game of Thrones with a friend who's actually watching for the first time, which is so much fun to see all his reactions and stuff like that. And then myself reading Lord of the Rings for the first time. And I'm publishing a ton of video essays if you want to subscribe, because I have tons of stuff on the channel about that. But both of these meshed in a perfect way. Now, granted, I've never read Game of Thrones, and I eventually will do so and publish some essays on this channel as I read through it. But in the show Game of Thrones, I just got to the episode where Yara Greyjoy goes to attempt a rescue of Theon from the Boltons. It's like a dreadful situation that Theon's in. And Theon, sleeping in the dog cages, actually bites his sister and refuses to go, thinking that it's a trap. Simultaneously, I just finished that episode, and then the next day I read Lord of the Rings, and I was at the chapter where they go through the section of the dead marshes, where Gollum, hearing the Nazgul overhead, is just paralyzed with fear, thinking that the whole thing is a trap set up for him, and that Sauron knows exactly where he is. And I think, weirdly, that these two characters bear a lot of other similarities other than just that one occurrence. And I want to talk about it, because I think it's a really fascinating thing, and I think George R.R. Martin actually modeled his character Theon after Gollum to some extent. Now, at first I want to talk about their demeanor. Now, I don't know everything about Smeagol, as I am reading this for the first time, and I don't know everything about Theon from the books, as I'd never read them before, but I will soon. Don't get on me for that. So this comparison will absolutely be lacking. But let's look at Theon in the first two seasons. He's a squire in Winterfell. He kind of hates it there. He wants to prove himself to his father. His crew doesn't respect him. He has a sexual addiction. He gropes his sister, not realizing it's his sister. And he's just an all-around scumbag with an absolute sex addiction. No one really likes him in the first few seasons. Then, after he gives a rousing speech at Winterfell, his men abandon him and leave him for the Boltons. Ramsay Bolton, the bastard son of Roose Bolton, captures him and tortures him for weeks of agony watching on that screen. It was awful. And he tortures him playing on his sexual addiction in some very disturbing ways. He both mutilates and castrates him, but not before putting two women in his chamber who arouse him and get him to think that he's being freed and pleasured. Then all of a sudden, Ramsay comes in and just messes everything up and then castrates him right there. Ramsay is perhaps the most, if not, he has to be in your top 3 most detestable characters in the entire show. I feel like he's most people's, but definitely in most people's top 3. And Ramsay does this to Theon over and over and over again. He lets him free one time before Theon even knows who Ramsay is, just to hunt him and bring him back. And so everything feels like a trick for Theon, which is why the episode where I am in season 4, where his sister Yara comes to rescue him, she gives a rousing speech and they find Theon in the dog cages. She unlocks it and tries to bring him out, and he absolutely and utterly refuses. She says, "We're going home." And Theon cowers against the wall, terrified that this is a trick. He says, "You can't trick me. Tell him you couldn't trick me." He thinks Ramsay is trying to trick him again, and so his guards are up. Yara pushes back. "I'm not tricking you, I'm saving you, Theon." "Not Theon, Reek. Reek. My name is Reek." Which was the name Ramsay told Theon that he was to go by now, and I have another point about that later that I'll get to. She gets another one of her soldiers to drag him out of the cages as Theon struggles and fights against it with everything in him. She tells him, "You're Theon Greyjoy," and he says, "I don't believe her. I know who I am." Ramsay comes in, and then they get in a fight, and Theon then bites Yara to get back into the cage. Yara escapes and says that her brother is dead, meaning that he's forgotten who he is and he's essentially as good as dead. And as I was watching that, it was so sad. It was so tragic. This scene shows how deeply this person has been abused. And to be honest, even though he's a kind of a loathsome character, and even though no one really liked him in the first few seasons, no one should be abused like that. And so Ramsay used this tactic to feed on his insecurities and on his lust and his weaknesses, so that he just lost all sense of self. He had two identities, one that he was trying to bury and the other that was always present. And that is the same with Gollum and Smeagol. Think of the similarities here between these two characters. Gollum is a stranger and a bit of an outcast in his whole family. Then he finds the ring and kills Deagle for it. He is an outcast even further and goes and hides in a cave for about 500 years, which maybe that's not a deep similarity with Theon. But then he stalks and hunts Frodo for the ring, and he's caught, and then you really realize that this isn't someone at all who's that fierce. And it's the same with Theon. He was just playing up his ferocity and intimidation. Now, I think they're both very dangerous people, but maybe they're more bark than bite. And also, forgive me for sounding crude for this comparison too, but perhaps I think for sure that they've actually lost the thing they perhaps prize the most in the world. Gollum has lost his ring, his precious, and Theon has just been castrated and lost his man bits, which is his precious. But there's a section in the book that shows how Gollum is so paranoid over being caught, just like how Theon is of being caught. That everything that is happening in his life right now, which is Gollum's life, is a trick of the enemy. This one section of the Two Towers, when a Nazgul flies over, just look at Gollum's response and how it compares to Theon. This is what the book says. As they stood straining their ears, they heard a noise like a wind coming from the distance. The misty lights wavered, dimmed, and went out. Gollum would not move. He stood shaking and gibbering to himself, until, with a rush, the wind came upon them, hissing and snarling over the marshes. The night became less dark, light enough for them to see, or half see. Shapeless drifts of fog curling and twisting as it rolled over them and past them. Looking up, they saw the clouds breaking and shredding. And then, high in the south, the moon glimmered out, riding in the flying wrack. For a moment, the sight of it gladdened the hearts of the hobbits, but Gollum cowered down, muttering curses on the white face. Then Frodo and Sam, staring at the sky, breathing deeply of the fresh air, saw it come. A small cloud, flying from the accursed hills. A black shadow loosed from Mordor. A vast shape, winged and ominous. It scudded across the moon, and with a deadly cry went away westward, outrunning the wind in its fell speed. They fell groveling heedlessly on the cold earth. But the shadow of horror wheeled and returned, passing lower now, right above them, sweeping the Fenreek with its ghastly wings. And then it was gone, flying back to Mordor with the speed of the wrath of Sauron. And behind it, the wind roared away, leaving the dead marshes bare and bleak. The naked waste as far as the eye could even pierce, even to the distant menace of the mountains, was dappled with the fitful moonlight. Frodo and Sam got up, rubbing their eyes like children, wakened from an evil dream to find the familiar night still over the world. But Gollum lay on the ground as if he had been stunned. They roused him with difficulty, and for some time he would not lift his face, but knelt forward on his elbows, covering the back of his head with his large flat hands. "Wraiths," he wailed. "Wraiths on wings. The precious is their master. They see everything. Nothing can hide from them. Curse the white face. And they tell him everything. He sees. He knows. Ah, Gollum, Gollum, Gollum." It was not until the moon had sunk, westering far away beyond Tol Brandir, that he would get up or make a move. Now, look how paranoid he is in this entire story. He thinks this is a trick of the enemy. He thinks that Sauron knows what he's up to, even though there is no evidence to the contrary. When I read this for the first time, I actually started to believe that Sauron knew where they were and what they were doing this entire time, just to some extent because Gollum was so adamant that he knew. But this is nothing more than just a deep paranoia over things that aren't really happening. But then, the comparison goes even further down to their name. There's a section in the book that I just thought, dang, did George steal this whole idea from Tolkien? Because this section in the book is how they're named. Essentially, it's like just what their names are. This is what the book says. But in a little while, he stopped suddenly and sniffed the air doubtfully, hissing as if he was troubled or displeased again. "What is it?" growled Sam, misinterpreting the signs. "What's the need to sniff? The stink nearly knocks me down, with my nose held. You stink, and Master stinks, the whole place stinks." "Yes, yes, and Sam stinks," answered Gollum. "Poor Smeagol smells it, but good Smeagol bears it. He helps nice Master, but that's no matter. The air is moving, change is coming. Smeagol wonders. He's not happy." And so Smeagol stinks, and Sam even calls him a stinker nonstop in the book, and that's one of the names that he has for Gollum. And here we have Theon, who goes by the name Reek. Like he reeks of something bad. I think the more and more I've been watching Game of Thrones, and the more I have been, going through these episodes, the more I've actually seen a lot of similarities to Lord of the Rings, and how much George R.R. Martin might have just stolen from J.R.R. Tolkien. I see so much of a similarity between these two characters. I think George R.R. Martin really stole a lot of ideas for Theon from the characterization of Gollum in a lot of things, and I don't blame him. Theon is one of the more loathsome characters, but he's also one of the more interesting characters in the entire series. And so it is with Smeagol. You hate him in the books, but you can't deny at least that he's an interesting character. And so I think these comparisons just go so far to showing how deep and how close these two characters are united. I can go into all sorts of other ways that they're really, really united, but I think if you give Theon a ring in 500 years, he would just become as terrifying and as dreadful as Smeagol. But maybe that's just me. Anyway, subscribe for more of this kind of content, and I will see you in the next one. Also, let me know what other comparisons that you see with Reek, aka Theon, and Smeagol, aka Gollum. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.